Now, I've got a mate, let's call him Steve, that tells me every time that we have a chat that it's too hard to break into the property market. The boomers own all the houses and they want us to live in shoeboxes moving forward. So in this video, we're going to have a chat about if I had to start again with only $50,000, what on earth would I do? Because this is the impossible question, is can I even break into the property market in 2025? And by 2030, are these houses going to be millions and millions of dollars and I just won't be able to live and afford life and rent and even think about buying a house? So let's dive into it. So that's what I hear all the time. I'll never be able to afford to buy a house. It's not possible for me to break into this market. It's too difficult and too expensive. So let's unpack it a little bit more. Now, we need to be honest with each other. $50,000 isn't a lot of money. And if you're working a full-time job, even saving 50K is not easy. I know for Emily and I, it took us 2.5 years to save $66,000. And that was as a couple. So if you're a single individual and you're living out of home as well, then saving 50K is not going to be easy. But $50,000 is enough to break into the market at this point in time. You don't need millions or hundreds of thousands. You need discipline, hard work, a good plan, and the right first move. So let's unpack 7 key steps you need to take to use this $50,000 to break into the market. Step number 1 is to live lean to build that deposit. You can see here that you need to cut out the fluff or the guff or whatever you want to call it. Cut out the nonsense that's costing you money. For me, that looked like cutting out extra subscriptions or walking as much as I could or catching public transport, saving your money on weekends, not going out and spending $200 every weekend to have fun with your mates, cutting out things that don't bring you a lot of joy or good experiences, and saving as much money as you can will allow you to build up that deposit. The next thing we've got is automating your savings straight after payday. Emily and I clearly had accounts which were transactional and then savings accounts. So it made it nice and clear how we were saving our money and how quickly when you're building up that savings amount. You then want to track your spending to find those leaks. So if you go through your bank statement and look at the last 3 months or 2 months, you'll be able to see all the line items that regularly hit. Do you have McDonald's, Hungry Jack's, Guzman and Gomez every day of the week? Can you cut that down to half the times a week in terms of takeaway? Or can you meal prep to save some money on meals, for example? Or subscriptions? Or can you get a yearly phone plan rather than a monthly one to save yourself some money that way? The next item is pick up extra shifts or a side hustle. I've pretty much always worked 2 or 3 jobs. I've always had a side hustle or a business or a venture. In my late teens, early 20s, I was a musician, would you believe? I used to play at pubs and bars Friday, Saturday, Sunday for 4 hours, playing sets at these pubs and bars and getting tips and also getting paid by the venue and getting fed. So that was my side hustle on top of my day job. And so that allowed me to earn some extra money to go towards those savings. You also need to remember that comfort now will potentially delay your freedom later. So you need to choose your hard. Do you want an easy life now but a difficult life later, or a harder life later and an easy life now? The thing is with property and investing in general is that you get those compounding returns. So if you do make a little bit more sacrifice up front, you can get a bigger payoff in the future. Step number 2 is to start with a clear strategy. What is your 5-year goal? What are you working towards? Is it going to take you 1, 2, 3 years to save? And then around year 3 or 4, you can look to break into the market. It's a long-term game, not a short-term game investing. What are your goals in terms of growth, cash flow, flexibility? What is your priority? For me, I'm a growth first guy. I want the growth first to build the asset base and then look for cash flow and flexibility and value add potential at a later date. We then need to match your strategy to your income and risk profile. What that means is you're going to have a limited amount of borrowing capacity and you're going to have a different risk profile to me or Steve or anyone else for that matter. Your friends, your family, everyone's going to have a different risk profile. So you need to look at what you're comfortable with and what your sleep at night factor looks like, as well as your income to service and buy an asset or buy your first home or buy your first investment. Don't just buy where you'd like to live, buy what moves you forward. This means thinking outside of the box a little bit. Maybe you need to move to Ipswich in southeast Queensland because that area is far more affordable than Brisbane City, for example. And so be willing to think outside of the box. Or could you be a borderless property investor for your first home? Say you can't buy in a Brisbane or a Melbourne or a Sydney. Maybe look at where I bought in Coffs Harbour, where it's a cheaper major regional market to get your foot in the door in terms of your property journey. Remember, a good strategy should filter out a lot of the bad deals, 90% of the bad deals. That's exactly what we do at Buyers Agents here at Purpose Property, is a lot of our searching involves removing all the bad deals, sifting through the rubbish to find those gems in the market that actually meet our buyers' criteria. Now we need to look at step number 3, which is borrowing smart and using the lenders and banks to your advantage. Use the first home guarantee, which is a 5% deposit if you're a first home buyer with no lender's mortgage insurance. If you're buying a $700K house, that means $35,000 would be enough of a deposit to break into the market. You can also use the First Home Super Saver scheme. Emily and I were some of the first people in Australia in 2018 to use the First Home Super Saver scheme by making a declaration, making those extra repayments, and breaking into our first property. At the time in 2018, I was working at an auditing or accounting firm here in Brisbane. And so I put an extra $2,000 a month to save in the super scheme, and that saved us around $5,000 each in terms of tax benefits. The next point is to ditch credit cards, afterpay services, and avoid car loans if you can. These things are all going to hamper your borrowing capacity. I've only ever taken out credit cards after I've built the property portfolio, and I've never had a car loan or never had any afterpay services because those are crazy interest rates and it's not helping you towards your savings goals. The next point is to have a chat with a broker early. They'll stretch and assess your borrowing capacity better than a bank can. And remember, you don't need to be rich to borrow well. It's about working with the right strategists, the right people to help you get access to that borrowing power so you can get the funds together for a property purchase. Step number 4 is buy low. Buy what you can afford. Don't be looking at those $2-3 million houses. Stay under $700,000 if you're a first home buyer to avoid stamp duty. Look for basic houses on reasonable blocks if you can, in decent streets. Avoid weird layouts, flood zones, over-renovated or properties that need too much work. Look at the land and location. That's going to do the heavy lifting for you. And remember, your first property is not a forever home. It's just a stepping stone to help you break into the property market. Now, I'm certainly not against buying a townhouse or a unit as well to help you keep that price low. You can still buy houses in southeast Queensland between that $600,000 to $700,000 price point, but if you've got less than $600,000, I would personally look at buying a townhouse or a unit to get my foot in the door. The main thing I'm looking for with those style of properties is generally the older buildings, so 70s, 80s or 90s builds. And so if I was saying to my mate Steve, and he only had a $550,000 budget, I'd be telling him to probably look for a 2 or 3 bedroom townhouse, which is in a smaller complex of less than ideally, 20 or 30 townhouses, and had a good land value for that area and maybe a bit of upside potential if he was to spruce up the kitchen or the bathroom in the future. Now we're starting to get creative with step number 5, which is potentially look at house sharing. Rent out a room to help you, cover those repayments. Go to flatmates. It's going to help boost your serviceability and income. Write up agreements with these flatmates, make it clear. Also, make sure you choose those housemates wisely. You want to make sure they're reliable and help you have an enjoyable experience where you're living. And getting roommates is a bit of a sacrifice, but it's going to fast track your journey. When Emily and I purchased our first property, we did, after a period of time, start renting out some rooms upstairs to help us cover the repayments. And we started essentially living at home for free. Now, there was certainly sacrifice involved with that. We were newly married. We were in our early 20s, so between the ages of 22 and 25. And our space was smaller, and we had other people in the upstairs area while we lived downstairs. And so there were certainly some sacrifices in step number 5 for us in sharing out the house and renting to some tenants down the track or roommates. But it was worth it for us because we started living for free at home. And that enabled us to save more money, to use funds towards renovations, and potentially looking at buying our second property. And this leads me into step number 6, which is that add value if you can. For Emily and I, that was sweat equity. So painting, gardens, blinds, carpets, anything that's cosmetic that you can DIY. That's why I became a DIY renovator. It's not because I love renovating, but it's because Rolling up your sleeves and spending some of your weekends adding value to your home adds thousands of dollars in terms of value, especially because tradies charge so much money at this point in time. Keep it light, white, and bright is always the saying that we had. Learn those basic skills. It's a good thing to have some mates come around and do some landscaping or do some flooring to save yourself some money. Learning those basic skills, having mates come around, and building equity can allow you to start creating more value in the property that you currently own. Adding value can make the house nicer to live in and enjoy. It's also very rewarding seeing the value of your property increase based on all your hard work. And then down the track, you can start to look to leverage off that equity that you've created. Now we've moved into step number 7, which is the refinancing process. You want to look to revalue every 12 to 24 months to unlock the equity that you've created in your own home and push that money into offset accounts until you're ready to use those funds for investing purposes. The uplift is the value that you've created. So generally you can refinance at an 80% LVR. So that's what I mean by keeping LVRs clean to avoid LMI if you can on the next property purchase. If you are going to use LMI, generally the sweet spot is around a 12% deposit. But for Emily and I, once we had enough equity in our properties, we started to refinance each of those deals, pull out enough money so we could put down 20% deposits on future property purchases. Remember that the equity is just the stepping stone to help you build that asset base. Use it to level up your property portfolio, not go out there and live large and start having more holidays or nicer cars or upgrading things just because you've got more money in your pocket. The purpose of the equity is to build your asset base. I think about any equity that I draw out of my properties as building the property portfolio, building that business, essentially that property business separately over there. And so I don't want to touch the equity, one, for tax purposes, but two, because those funds should be used for building the asset base and investing, not to just fund my lifestyle and my hobbies. So let's give you a realistic example. What would I buy today if I was starting again? I've got a limited budget. I've got $50,000. What would the house look like? Here's a great example that's listed on real estate at the moment. 27 Cramp Street in Goodna. 3-bed, 1 bath, 686 square meters. It's a fibro asbestos home, which has a reasonable layout, as you can see here. It's a decent sized floor plan, and it needs a little bit of work, but it's currently in a livable condition. That's the kind of property that I could get in with family and mates and add some value to if I was willing to paint it and do some landscaping. It's a property that you could add a secondary dwelling to at a later date. It's a property that you could add value to create that equity. And this kind of deal would land in, say, the mid $600,000 at this point in time. Now, property investing is not easy, and if you want some help, head over to purposeproperty.com.au to book in a free chat with myself where we can talk about your goals, whether you're a first home buyer or an investor or an owner-occupier looking to buy a property here in Southeast Queensland. We can help you strategize and build the approach to buying that next property. The truth is it's not easy to buy property. If it's your first time, it's always going to be difficult. Saving the money is difficult. Buying the property is difficult. But if you follow those 7 steps that we've gone through today, it's certainly possible to buy a property with a $50,000 deposit in today's market and then to look to build from there. It's your starting platform. I do hear a lot of Steves or friends that do say it's impossible, but I certainly believe it's possible. And I certainly believe if you took me back to when I started and put me in this market, in this position, it would still be possible today to build out a sizable property portfolio. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have the boomers taken over and is all hope lost? Or do you think it's still possible to break into Australia's property market? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and give this video a click over here because YouTube reckons that's the one you should watch. I'll see you in that video. All right, peace.